Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
See anybody? Can you see me?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I had to start my video. Got it. Okay, it wasn't clicked. Can you see me now?
Yes.
Okay, I can't see anybody. Is that normal?
Do you have a gallery mode on?
Upper right-hand corner, there's a
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was trying to do. Got it. Okay. All right. Yes, I can see everybody now. Hello.
Hey, I think we're all here now. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Emily Zimmerman. I'm the director and curator of the Jacob Lawrence Gallery at the University of Washington School of Art, Art History and Design, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's panel discussion. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for being here today for this AAMC conference panel, Local Voices, Collaboration Across the University of Washington. I hope you're all staying safe and keeping healthy during these difficult times. I'd like to take a moment to thank AAMC and Judith Pinero for the invitation to hold this conversation, and for Lucy Lydon for all of her thoughtful logistical support. I'm grateful to AAMC for their efforts to keep us safe this year by moving the conference online. Certainly, this has been a time of coming together through collaboration to collectively tackle the problems with us and ahead of us. I want to thank all of our distinguished panelists for graciously and generously participating in today's conversation. I am joined by Michelle Witt, Artistic Director of the University of Washington World Series and Executive Director of Meany Hall, Sylvia Wolf, John S. Benke, Director of the Henri Art Gallery, and Julie Stein, Executive Director of the Burke Museum. We'll be reserving the last 15 minutes of the session for questions, so please hold them till the end. Also, please note that all viewpoints expressed in the conference are those of each individual speaker and do not reflect the opinions or viewpoints of the AAMC or AAMC Foundation. At the University of Washington, we're able to ask what collaboration can look like at one of the world's leading public research institutions. Collaborations across universities benefit on-campus communities by fostering a dynamic institutional climate, encouraging adventurous research by faculty, and by creating a vibrant learning environment for students. Collaboration has proven to be an effective strategy for counteracting challenging times by allowing institutions to combine the intellectual, infrastructural, and financial resources to achieve goals that cannot be reached alone. The University of Washington has been deeply committed to fostering collaborative work for students and faculty to study, teach, and research across boundaries. Additionally, this past year, the University of Washington applied for and received the Carnegie Foundation's 2020 Community Engagement Classification as part of the university's longstanding commitment to public good and collaboration with community partners across the city, state, and across the world. Because you all have the panelists' bios already, I won't be covering those to save time for our discussion, but by way of introduction, I did want to briefly highlight some of the interwoven histories of the arts and sciences at the University of Washington to begin our conversation from the perspective of a long, venerable, and collaborative history. After the university was founded in 1861, the Young Naturalist Society was founded in 1885 by Edmund Meany, J.O. Young, P. Brooks Randolph, and Charles Denny. This collection would go on to form the beginnings of the collections of the Burke Museum. The first art class was held in 1890, and in 1895, the university moved from downtown Seattle to its present location. And the collections of the Young Naturalist Society were transferred to Denny Hall, where the state legislature designated them as the Washington State Museum in 1899. In 1809, the Seattle hosted its first World's Fair, known as the Seattle excuse me, Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition, and as part of the exposition, the original Meany Hall was constructed with 2,600 seats and was located where the Henri Art Gallery now stands. In 1924, the University of Washington School of Art granted the first MFA in the country to Mabel Liesel Ducasse. 3 years later, the Henri Art Gallery was founded as Washington State's first art museum, when Horace and Susan Henri donated their collection and $100,000 to the university. In 1974, a new performance hall was created for the Meany Center for the Performing Arts, and which was just built next to its former entrance. The Henri Art Gallery underwent its major expansion in 1997, designed by Charles Gwathmey, quadrupling the museum's size. Finally, in 2019, the new Burke Museum opened to the public, transforming the northwest corner of the University of Washington campus. So after that brief interview, I wanted to start off our conversation with a series of case studies from all of the institutions in which they've been able to collaborate across campus in service of building a campus culture that celebrates multidisciplinary work, public engagement, and equity. And I think, Michelle, would you want to speak to that question? Oh, Michelle, we can't hear you. I think the audio in the lower.
Of course. All right. I do know how to use Zoom. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on this panel, Emily. I did want to say just quickly that the Meany Center for the Performing Arts, the Henri Gallery, and the Burke Museum were all campus-facing entities, but we're also externally facing into the community. And so we're unique hybrid institutions at the University of Washington. And so we have a double mission, and that's very important to everything that we do. Meany Center for the Performing Arts is a hub for activating performances of students and faculty. And we also present artists from around the world as part of the Meany Visiting Artist series. And these are artists in music, dance, and theater. And my title actually is changed. I'm executive and artistic director of the Meany Center for the Performing Arts. And it represents a bringing together of the two entities you mentioned, Emily, a few years ago to further connect our mission between what's happening between students and faculty and also our visiting artists, which leads me to our example of collaboration. My first example is something that we instituted about 4 years ago called the Creative Fellowships Initiative, where we really focused on artist-centered creative process as an end in itself. And we partnered with creative artists, with our arts division leaders, as well as our performing arts faculty. What this did was it really expanded Meany's role as a presenter to be able to take full advantage of our role at a Research One university, which UW is. And we brought artists who represent a diverse spectrum of perspectives. We have had 24 artists in residence over the last 3 years with wildly divergent and widely divergent creative processes, and we haven't required a performance. These on-site residencies have really been the core of the Creative Fellowships Initiative, and we've again focused on creative process, which has allowed them to radically shift the paradigm of how they approach their work. This was the first iteration of this work around creativity. We have started a second iteration of that, which we call our second pillar, and we call it the Arts and Creativity Initiative at the University of Washington, where we partnered with our arts division, with our faculty as creative fellows in their own right, and visiting creative fellows. And what this has allowed us to do is to create new large-scale ongoing coursework around creativity from a cross-disciplinary perspective. We have been able to support cross-disciplinary faculty creative research and community building, where they're also inviting visiting artists to join them in their research. And it's been a continuation of the Creative Fellowships Initiative for visiting artists through Meany, which I mentioned earlier. So that's a really important project that has allowed us to completely redefine who we are, in a sense, as an arts presenter in terms of developing a real commitment around creative process, and it opens us up to the entire university and also to a number of different campus partners that I'll talk about later on.
Great, thank you. Sylvia, did you want to talk about a case study from the Henri Art Gallery? Oh, I think we can't hear you.
Here we go. I wanted to start with Horace Henri and Susan Henri's mandate early on. It was unusual in 1926-27 to form a museum around the idea of presenting art of the current day, which of course today we call contemporary art. So for well over 90 years, we have been presenting the art that's being made, and that's reflecting the work that we're in. That automatically implies collaborating with artists and putting ourselves at the service of artists' imaginations. That's what we do. It's in our DNA. It's the way we're trained. It's how we're built. It's what gives us joy. So as an artist-centered and audience-engaged organization, we have for many years invited artists to make art in our building, oftentimes just saying, what if, ... And that's how we started with Ann Hamilton back in 2010, I think, a conversation. What if, Ann, you were to take over the entire footprint of the Henri? What would you do? And over a period of 5 years, a project evolved, and part of her artistic practice is to bring in multiple collaborators and partners, particularly across campus, whether it's the School of Music, whether it was comparative literature, or the Burke Museum of Natural History. And every step of the way, we facilitated the conversations and opened up doors, but it was artist generated. And when we're always happiest, when artists are taking us outside of our comfort zones, and Anne did that for us to brilliant effect. It brought us in conversation with the Burke and with the Burke Curators, and I thought maybe I'd pause there and pass it on to Julie to see what it was that was the impact of a global artist asking to use animal specimens and articles of clothing from indigenous collections in an art museum with an artist's name on it.
Well, thank you, Sylvia. As you can imagine, Sylvia asked to see much of our Arctic collection, the clothing, and the curator, Sven Hawkinson, was very happy to show her and very used to engaging with an artist. However, she then asked to see the curator of birds and mammals and herpetology. And when they said, what would you like to do? Of course, they imagined she would say, I would like to see your robins, your owls, a specific kind of bird. And what she said was, I would like to open up every cabinet and pull out the drawers and look at the specimens, and I'll know it when I see it. And this was more than the collections managers could absolutely handle. So they came back to me, are you sure this is okay? Are you sure we should let her do this? Yes, it's okay. She's an artist. Give her the rules of how to handle your specimens. And then she just started opening the drawers, but they became so curious that they followed her around. And she'd pull out a bird, and then they'd say, why did you pick that bird? And after a while, she said, I like the way that the feet of the bird cross over and are tied together as the study skin specimen was made. This blew them away and changed the way they prepare birds forever. From that moment on, they now, with great care, fold the feet of the birds over and think of Ann Hamilton every time they prepare a bird specimen. So artists, when they come into a foreign place, may be expecting that they will be greeted one way or suspiciously, but I don't think Ann had any idea of how much she would impact how the Burkes collaboration changed the staff of the Burke Museum.
An incredible case study. Thank you for sharing those. I was wondering if there are some strategies from the above case studies for nurturing collaboration within a large institutional structure to harness the potential impact of a Research One University to enrich learning on campus.
I can jump in. A campus is an incredible canvas for sparking innovation and ideas and being able to partner artists with expertise in their areas of interest. So it's just a really wonderful environment to be. And I mean, we have recently paired choreographer Brian Brooks with virtual reality researchers and also Seattle-based physicists and programmers of virtual reality, because he was really interested in investigating dance beyond the body and art making on the digital frontier. And it was really incredible in terms of, he created a new work that engaged virtual and augmented reality, which we premiered in February. But just, following an artist's interests and being able to pair them with creators and researchers on campus is fabulous. I'll stop there.
And certainly the University of Washington offers such a rich diversity of perspectives and disciplines for artists to engage with. I wonder, Julie, has the new Burke brought any new collaborations and potential learning environments?
Well, yes, I would like to have Sylvia join me and talk about one that came our way, and it's about the Conservation Center. The Conservation Center was started by Sylvia and the Henri in collaboration with the libraries and their special collections. And she knows the story of how it started. But I am the lucky recipient of an expansion of that center to include the archives of the Burke. So Sylvia, could you tell us how that came about?
Yes, we had an invitation by a funder to envision what a collaboration might look like with the museum, the art museum, and the UW libraries. And of course, we've collaborated with them multiple times, as our peers have, I'm sure, who are watching, in terms of lending works of art from our collections. UW has extensive special collections. And so there was a dialogue and a relationship that was longstanding and decades long. What we could have applied for funding to continue that practice, but we figured we're going to do that anyway. Why not see if there's another collaboration that might serve us? And conservation was an area that we landed on. The University of Libraries had just built a new conservation laboratory. They had the capacity to handle rare books, but there are extensive collections of works on paper and photographs, both at the Henri and UW libraries. So we applied for a collaborative associate conservator position. We received funding for a period of time, a set period of time. We hired someone who was a joint position, and believe me, that came with all kinds of challenges, including different protocols for accessing buildings, how do you do a business card, front and back. Hired a brilliant person in Claire Kenny. And then when the occasion came to apply for another grant to expand upon that, we realized that the Burke Museum was a natural partner because of their collections and their paper-based and photo-based materials. So now we have 3 organizations that are going to be, we just started our collaboration and going to be figuring out how to do all of this, where the works of art themselves will be treated in the conservation laboratory, but the work will be shared by all 3.
Great. And just to loop back to Michelle for a moment, I'm so sorry, I jumped in at the wrong moment.
No, not at all, not at all. I think this is also very important to collaborations. Just to note that we've also been able to incorporate community members, faculty, and students into the artist creative process as well, which has been really exciting with a lot of interesting examples of that. And also using sites as a jumping off point for creative collaborations and really looking at site-specific work and how artists can both respond to those works and then how to engage audiences around live works that happen site-specifically. And that's been something that we've gotten very excited about as well. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned both of those because they're both very important aspects of our strategic partnerships and collaborations through our programming.
Those are, incredible strategies for harnessing what's here, both kind of in terms of space and in terms of infrastructure, using the University of Washington as a canvas, as you say. In the past year, the University of Washington applied for and received the Carnegie Foundation Community Engagement Classification. How have your institutional collaborations moved beyond the campus community to engage non-campus audiences and to contribute to public knowledge and resources?
I might jump in there. I can start with, I'll give 3 examples actually. The Henri has a collection of roughly 28,000 objects, and we have a collection study center, which is the only center in the region for viewing works of art up close and personal, ones that you choose. Our associate curator of collections, Olsen, has been pulling works from the collection in a reframe program, which invites people to come in and see works that have clusters of meaning together. And I would invite you to take a look online. She just launched a digital version last week of works from our collection that show interior spaces, including David Hart's fabulous photograph of the Johnson Publication Building in Chicago. Then our other curators, Mita Mahato and Nina Bezichnik, are planning a symposium with the Simpson Center, and that's upcoming, acknowledging the private and protections that certain embodiments have under Western law. And it will be 3 days over 3 months during next year, coinciding with the 100-year anniversary of women's suffrage in the United States, that will offer a series of presentations and workshops that imagine, explore, and enact possibilities for survival and liberation for those left out of or oppressed by the law. And then Shamim Momin, our senior curator, has also shown multiple opportunities for that, some of which are artist driven, such as Oscar Tuazon's Water School project. We did a poetry workshop with poet laureate Claudia Castro-Luno. We're right now still working with Northwest Film Forum. We work with Seattle Public Library. Edgar Arsenault's Library of Black Lies a year or so ago was an artist-led collaboration with Langston Hughes. So this is where what Michelle was saying in the beginning, I think is really an important pivot. I'm coming to hate the word pivot, by the way, but an important word to a concept to think about. And that is, we are both campus facing and we are external facing. And whether we're actually engaging with campus partners or community partners, there's a great deal of cross-fertilization for the benefit of all.
That's great.
I would like to add that as the Washington State Museum, the Burke Museum is the Washington State Museum of Natural History and Culture. We take very seriously our responsibility to collaborate with tribal museums, which there are many in the region, and to work with tribal artists and communities, indigenous, especially Pacific Island, to bring them into the museum to do whatever they want, essentially. It is not our job to say what they want to look at or what community members they want to bring, or whether it is a prayer or a ritual or retro engineering, whatever they want to do, or to make art in the presence of other art. we take this very seriously and have a very strong reputation for doing this kind of work. It's been happening for decades, and it is a very important outwardly facing function of the Burke Museum.
Wonderful, thanks. Thanks, Julie. I can just add that for us, public participatory artworks and symposia have been wonderful ways to engage our community. And we recently had a performing arts curator and producer, Mayan Wang, who investigated the notions of space that have been sort of opened by developments in virtual and augmented reality again. And she hosted a theoretical festival at a local, a different theater downtown, which connected creative thinkers in science, technology, and the humanities and the arts, which also included site-specific participatory performance works in collaboration with the Seattle Art Museum and at a park in Seattle called Seattle's Freeway Park. You can imagine that must be near a freeway, but it was really fabulous, a way to engage audiences and in new ways. And we've also done quite a bit, again, of site-specific public engagement. This most recently, we were able to develop a new work with a group called Bandaloop that actually premiered a work off of the side of Meany Hall. They are rock climbers who also then became dancers and choreographers. And it's just amazing how many new audiences and new participants an organization can develop when you really do work site-specifically and go to where there are large numbers of people. In our case, we have thousands of students walking by Meany Hall every day between their classes. And it was a wonderful way, again, to engage new audiences. And then we also have partnered artists together, both visiting artists and community artists, in silent and creative retreats. We have some wonderful places to get away here in Seattle, beautiful Whidbey Island, and a number of different gorgeous natural settings. I'm sorry that you're not all able to experience them this time, but we've been able to help to cultivate creativity through collaborative mindfulness and reflection retreats. And that has been fantastic. It was part of our Creative Fellows initiative. And it's something that is continuing with the individual artists that use that time here to develop those.
I remember one of the dinners for the Creative Fellows initiatives that was totally transformative in my own thinking as I was entering the position here at the Jacob Lawrence Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
So the final question before we open things up for questions from the audience. Certainly there could be an entire conference devoted to the ways that institutions are shifting and adapting to the COVID-19 conversations. And I was wondering what forms of collaborative structures and strategies have been most useful for adaptation in this time.
Well, let me just start in that the University of Washington provides an opportunity for the leaders, chairs of the arts departments, and the three of us to meet on a monthly basis. And sometimes the subjects are rather academic or rather student focused, and other times they are outwardly public focused, yet we know each other better than we ever would have if we did not meet monthly. That I can call Michelle or Sylvia anytime with a question. We help each other all the time. So when this hit, we immediately said, what are you going to do? When are you going to close? Well, Sylvia and I did because we were both open at the time. Are you going to close? It was First Free Thursday. Are you going to hold it? So I think that practice, sometimes I'm a little resentful to give an hour and a half every month to that group, but I think it is absolutely essential and recommend that everybody has a group like that they meet monthly.
I think I'll follow up on that. That group is headed up by our Divisional Dean of the Arts, Dr. Catherine Cole, who has come to the University of Washington in recent years to really create a vision for the arts across campus. And one of the great privileges of being at the University of Washington is its scale and its size, 65,000 faculty, students, and staff. As a Research One institution with a strong science, engineering, medical, and public service mission, sometimes the arts have felt that they needed to make their case. Well, one of the things that we do say with a unified voice, because of this convening on a regular basis, is that making art and creating works of art is a form of research in its own right, where the scientists may be seeking answers to questions, and those answers are provable and incontrovertible. Artists themselves are trying to seek the questions to ask. And that's something that is a message that we're getting across and a message that's being understood. What Julie was saying, though, about cohorts is really crucial. There's a cohort here in town that is the culture roundtables, culture and heritage organizations, the CEOs of the aquarium, the zoo, the museums, the theaters, the music venues. And we get together on a monthly basis. It's been extraordinarily helpful for us during this time. And we've been joined, we're fortunate in this region to have terrific civic leaders. Our governor has been inspiring. Our mayor, Jenny Durkin, has been terrific. County Council Dow Constantine has been communicative with us. So even in communities where you may not have that yet, it's possible to arrange for those convenings, and they will serve you well when the time comes. And I know there are other things we could be talking about. Michelle, I'm sure you have some thoughts.
Well, I just wanted to also underscore the importance of those monthly meetings with university colleagues and leaders, because that was where I also got to know Dr. Catherine Cole, who became my partner on developing courses around creativity and involving faculty in creative research with visiting artists. So, I mean, it's just those relationships that build over time. It's not simply the transactional moments of sharing information, but it is the building of relationships and collegiality that is really, it is invaluable, truly. I also wanted to mention a couple of other consortiums that we're parts of. Of course, AAMC is a wonderful consortium, and we have something similar to that in the performing arts with the Association of Performing Arts Professionals. We also have the International Society for the Performing Arts, and I'm on a panel tomorrow with the Banff head of the Center for Creativity in the Performing Arts, and also the director of the Performing Arts program at NYU Abu Dhabi, about what we're doing for next year and how we're doing it. But those, again, those just friendships and that information sharing is critical. And then we also have something for university performing arts presenters, which I would highly suggest if you don't already have one for visual arts organizations within universities to start one up. But it's called the Major University Presenters Network. We have about 20 members. All of us are at Research One universities, and we work together on everything from, we have meeting groups between our finance directors, marketing directors, development directors, programmers, our CEOs. We get together twice a year in person as CEOs somewhere in the country. All of our directors get together once a year within their cohort somewhere in the country. Right now we're working on a collaborative commissioning consortium that we're developing together so that we can support artists during this time. But it's you know, every question that any of our directors have can be brought to these groups. And it's also a time to talk about how we're affected personally, because sometimes within institutions like universities, we're perhaps the only person that might know exactly how to do our job for quite a distance. And so to be able to share both professional challenges and opportunities, but also personal challenges too, has been really incredibly valuable. And so and we continue to meet on Zoom. We're meeting every week or two, and our teams are meeting as well. And I just can't say enough about groups like that.
And if I could just add one thing, Oh, it's for us, the artists that we collaborate with on a regular basis in regular time. They're the ones that just take my breath away in times like this. The artists that we've been committed to for on-site programs or upcoming exhibitions, to be in communication with them right now and problem solving about how to deliver content, how to engage with our audiences, how to help realize their vision under new circumstances. They're creators, they're problem solvers. They're the ones that lead us in new directions. And so really the artists, as well as our community partners, are the folks that we collaborate with because it's part of who we are. But under these times, we need each other all the more. So a note of gratitude to all of them.
That's fabulous, Sylvia. Thanks for sharing that.
We have a few questions from conference attendees. If you'd be open to diving into those, there's some really rich questions here. The first one is, how do you see a museum or art space functioning different at an R1 school versus smaller liberal arts campuses?
Would you repeat that again? Sorry, I got lost in the center there.
Yeah, how do you see a museum or art space functioning differently at an R1 school versus a smaller liberal arts campus?
Okay, I didn't hear the middle section. There was a bleep. There are lots of differences that I observe. And I think it's not just our one universities, it's also the community in which you serve. Because small liberal arts, academic institutions oftentimes are in smaller towns where they may be the only offering for the arts or art in that region or that community. And so they serve a different purpose than an organization like the Henri, where there are multiple arts organizations within our region. Michelle, what would you think?
Well, I would say that's sometimes true, sometimes not. I mean, sometimes our big R1 institutions are in very isolated spaces. I'm thinking of, the University of Nebraska and Kansas, and even the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. And so I think that there are different scenarios in which we all exist. But I do think that it can both help to focus programming because you simply have a different set of partners. And you're not necessarily having to connect to scientists and, or different types of it depends on the institution, of course. There are, of course, scientists at liberal arts institutions, but if they're not as research-based, maybe it's greater focus on undergraduate academic work and research. It just helps to, I think, can focus in the work, but there are some fantastic examples of, I know, university-based performing arts presenters at liberal arts institutions such as Dartmouth is one of them, Wesleyan is another that has a very strong program. And they've chosen to focus on curatorial vision and created an Institute for Institute for Curatorial Practice and Performance, and it's very well known. And so I think it's just an opportunity to be able to focus in a little bit more, and it just has a different set of partnerships that are open to it.
One of the things I would add is that in perhaps both cases, the museums tend to be opportunities for the public to safely tread on the university's campus. It is very off-putting for a member of the public who's never been to college or doesn't go to that college to enter the campus of either liberal arts or an R1 university. And the excuse of going to a museum, especially with kids coming to see dinosaurs, is sometimes the only opportunity they have to be welcomed onto the campus. I think that museums on universities do serve this function, whether they be liberal arts or R1.
Great. And then we have a rather lengthy question with two parts. So I'm going to read the whole thing because there's an addendum that was added because the question was partially answered in the course of our conversation. It says, I work at a museum on a campus of a large public university. I wondered if you're forming advisory groups comprised of faculty at your respective galleries, museum centers across departments to address how you can best serve faculty, students, and the mission of the university, given the uncertainty of in-person classes. If so, how are you conducting them? And are they with usual suspects, universities with whom you regularly engage or use you as a teaching tool / resource? How are you balancing your commitment to the immediate university with the community and international art world? And the follow-up to that is, I'll add to my question since Julie addressed this somewhat. Opportunities are being offered at the director level, but how do curators, programmers, and content generators engage? Thank you. So I think the question that's being asked is there a secondary level of consortiums for non-directors across the university to be able to collaborate in their programming?
I think for the Burke Museum, which probably is not the same as all the art museums here, the curators are faculty, and many of the collections managers and the people who work on the collections have ties to the departments and ties to the content specialists within those departments. They help faculty help aid students who are working on projects and research and theses. And it is, they form relationships with individuals in departments across campus and within art museums and other museums in the community. So I think at every level in the museum, there is a cohort of people at that level across the community and within the university. But that's just for the Burke.
From my own perspective, because I tend to fall more into the curator camp than director camp, I also find that those cohorts shift by project too. So I'll be in conversation with a set of collaborators, and while those relationships extend beyond that project, the primary kind of stakeholders will change, and I'll meet with them on, somewhat more regular bases, depending on what we're showing.
I think that's a really important point. I know for Meany, we have a lot of cross-level teams that form around projects. So whether it's looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, or whether it's looking at our online content development now, which is huge for us, or whether it's student engagement, they form around topic areas that are part of our strategic plan, and they shift over time, and we bring people in from completely unrelated departments as well, because sometimes they just come up with some really interesting ideas that we would never have thought of if we stick within departmental subject areas.
I agree, and I think what happens is when you have projects that introduce you to new faculty. We had a project some years ago that came about when a group wished to, there was it was a conference, Labor and Working Class History Association annual conference. It was in 2017. And there's a Seattle-based collective, If You Don't, They Will, who presented an exhibition called No Not Ever, or a presentation of archive materials that represented the history of collective civic engagement and cultural organizing working to counter white nationalism. And that was an instance in which our curators, we were approached by this collective, and then a relationship and a conversation began between the curators and our staff across the board, because there was subject matter that we had to address from a museum services standpoint, from an equity standpoint, from an operational standpoint, enough provocation in the material that we should be prepared if we had to have some folks come in that might create some difficulty for us at the front door. Anyway, all of the conversations that were generated around that resulted in new relationships across campus, new relationships with the community. And those relationships do tend to echo over time. They do tend to circle back. I will say that that show went on view in June, that presentation in June of 2017, and that in August is when Charlottesville erupted, and we realized, my goodness, there's something that is in our building right now that has new resonance that it didn't have before. And Emily, I know our curators work with you, you have worked with us. A trust and a dialogue begins to build that's deep and long lasting. And I would say that's one of the things that's the most rewarding, and that it's a collaboration of a deeper kind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also just to add, within some of the national consortium that we all have, I think it is really important for directors of departments to involve their staff in these subject area conversations, so that it isn't just with directors, but it is really with a group of individuals who are best suited to have those conversations at any given time. And that's really up to leadership to open that door.
And I would add one more thing. I learned more from my curators than I could ever know on my own. I mean, I listen to them. I'm eager to hear what they're hearing from their colleagues. So to Julie's point, I think up and down and across, hopefully it's not up and down, hopefully it's more across the organization. There's opportunity for staff at all levels to be able to engage with their peers.
And I think the university also does a really fantastic job of valuing collaboration, creating communication structures so that everyone on campus is aware of what's going on. The Arts UW initiative keeps us all on the same page about what's happening, and funding centers like the Simpson Center for the Humanities that prioritize institutional collaboration on campus really keep it front and center in everyone's mind as they're enacting their program. We have a question for Julie. In terms of collaborating with local Native communities, how does the Burke negotiate exhibiting contemporary works of art alongside anthropological specimens and its other collections?
Well, first of all, it helps very much to think of them all as works of art. So whether they were made by the ancestors or whether they are made by people who are still on this earth, it is really important in your mind to really think about all objects as works of art. The notion of the anthropological or the ethnographic is really no longer contemporary or appropriate. The way that we have made most progress is by hiring a tribal liaison. Her name is Polly Olsen. She is a member of the Yakama Nation, and I hired her into a director level position. So she's reports directly to me. And she has systematically over 3 and 4 years walked around the museum and educated every single one of us as to the unconscious bias that we have. As I just pointed out, thinking of the historic objects as being different from the contemporary objects, as thinking about our Native American Advisory Board was somehow different from our Burke Museum Association board, which was part of the nonprofit. They're both boards and we need to treat them equally. So I cannot urge people strongly enough to have a true collaboration with Native people. And that means inviting them into the museum and going to wherever they are. We travel to the tribal museums. We take our objects to the communities. So it is a systematic unraveling of our biases. And it's hard. It's going to take forever. It probably will never be done. But it is a very rewarding journey.
That's a collaboration with long-term commitments and integrity are some of the most, the strongest examples of collaboration that the University of Washington can offer, because it's such a long-standing institution and provides the opportunity for dialogues to take place over decades. Sylvia, you had wanted to mention something about stakeholders and artists.
I made that point. Just that our yes, thank you. Thank you.
But I actually think, and I was just thinking about this, Sylvia, after what you said, is that this is such an unusual time. And we need to, rally all of our resources, and our artist collaborators and partners are some of the most creative thinkers in our communities and in our extended communities. And so to think about inviting them into communication with our staffs about how we're approaching some of these situations is also something that we've done in the past around other issues, but it's I think a good time to do that as well, because and actually I have been doing that, and we have been doing that in ways in which we're structuring next season and getting feedback. But our artists are some of our greatest resources, and we're important partners to them, and vice versa. And so the more that we can include them in this time as we're thinking through our various scenarios, programming, and partnerships, I think it's really wise.
Could I ask, in terms of practical nuts and bolts, and it may be too early to speak to these issues, but has COVID-19 shifted the way that you work with artists? And as you're looking forward to next year, are there new models that you're working on in those relationships?
I'll jump in because we are a couple of things. One, we're very much, there's a lot of risk for everyone going into next season. And for a performing arts presenter, I can speak from that context. And we're looking at how can we both create guaranteed resources for artists, no matter what happens, whether their performances are canceled or not. How can we cap some of our risks? So can we think about smaller productions? Can we remove some of the production elements, or shift the program a little bit? Can we bring some of those high costs down? And then what do we do if something is canceled? Can we develop online content collaboratively with artists from a distance, where we're going in to see their studios, we're seeing a rehearsal in progress, we're seeing drawings of their costume and set designs, we're talking to the composers who worked on the music for the pieces, perhaps, or whatever that looks like, that's unique and that amplifies the live performance experience, doesn't necessarily replace it, although there's of course a lot of live streaming happening right now too. But how can we share the risk and create some security for these artists whose livelihoods have really been decimated? And then how can we collaborate together to create new work now, so that we can be thinking about the future, whether that work is being developed with online sharing at this point. So is it a work in progress? Is it going into an artist studio? Is it an online exhibition in this coming year that then moves to in-person events? But how can we really share in the costs and the work around making this happen with our colleagues nationwide and perhaps internationally as well, and of course within our own communities.
Similarly, at the Jacob Lawrence Gallery, we've had to, while keeping our commitment to artists, also have begun opening up prior exhibitions to be open-ended questions that we collaborate together to create a new structure, to receive their work and their thought, whatever that structure may be, whether it's, you know, a talk that now becomes a video piece that lives online, or something else. Are there any final questions that anyone would, that looks like all of the questions that we received from our attendees. I'd like to thank you all for taking this time to have this conversation. It's a really rich and ongoing dialogue, and such a gift to be able to work alongside you at the University of Washington.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily. It's a wonderful environment. And for those people who, just to add this, as we have a couple of minutes, just for those people who are really trying to get their heads around social distancing and what that's going to look like for your venues and your organizations, I think if you are at universities or near universities, partnering with their public health departments and experts there, and then partnering together to try to understand what this is going to look like, because we do anticipate that this is going to be a reality for us for quite some time, and it will impact all of us. And we do have, again, those of us at universities with public health departments have those resources, and they are wonderful resources for the entire community. And I think you would find that those individuals are more than happy to help as much as they can.
This has been an incredible time of coming together through collaboration with various departments to problem solve. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for
Thank you
letting
so much, Emily.
Thank you, Emily.
Very enjoyable. Thank you.
Thanks.